Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's an unprecedented, unusual change in what's happening with the coyotes right now.
A warning after another coyote attack in Stanley Park, this time on a 2-year-old. Also,
probably the worst feeling I've ever had run through me.
a family devastated. Their son, one of the victims in that deadly crane collapse in Kelowna. And
we need to respond and meet the test of those demands to provide the service people need.
how BC is bolstering its ambulance service after plenty of criticism.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. A 2-year-old girl is recovering from injuries to her neck and head after being bitten by a coyote in Stanley Park. Tonight, a warning advising people to avoid the park altogether. Isabel Regam joins us live tonight near where the attack took place. Isabel, take us through what happened.
Anita, it happened in this area just off the parking lot of the Vancouver Aquarium Monday night. The toddler was with a group of several adults and several other children when officials say the coyote jumped out of a bush and pounced on the 2-year-old.
If you choose to use the park, it would be at your own risk.
Stay away from Stanley Park, at least right now. It's what Conservation Officer Sergeant Gravel is advising the public after a 2-year-old girl was attacked by a coyote Monday night.
The father was next to her and he had a chair and managed to scare the coyote immediately, but unfortunately the young 2-year-old was suffered from some injuries, some bite mark at the neck and at the head.
Today, he says the toddler is back home from the hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. It's news that has this mom keeping her 3-year-old daughter a little bit closer today.
During the day, I mean, we're always walking around together, holding hands, or mommy's close, right? Oh yeah, no, it's very scary.
It's just the latest in a series of coyote attacks in the park in recent months.
So 2001 to last year, there's been 8 attacks. So in the span of nearly 30 years, 8 attacks. From the beginning of this year to now, we've had about around 20 attacks. So it's an unprecedented, unusual change.
Sergeant Gravel believes that number is even higher, counting about 30 attacks in the last 7 months. So far this year, 2 coyotes have been euthanized. Has enough been done? What has been done?
A lot has been done. A lot of signage have been installed in Stanley Park, a lot of outreach.
While they don't know yet why there's such a surge in attacks, people feeding the animals is considered a very likely factor. And there's speculation that the pandemic and fewer cars in the park may have played a role.
One of the things it did was reduce the number of coyotes being killed on roads by cars. So a sudden increase in coyote population size might be causing the coyotes to become much more dedicated to their territories.
Patrol officers will be roaming the park over the next few days, trying to locate the coyote based on descriptions given, and the possibility of a call is being discussed.
Population control of coyotes needs to be done with a lot of consideration and science behind it. Right now it's under review. Is it worth it? Is it efficient to do such a thing?
For now, he says the best tool is education.
Isabel, a pretty scary situation for a lot of people involved. What are officers doing tonight to make sure others are safe?
The Conservation Office says it's increasing patrols tonight. The Vancouver Park Board has also closed off a portion of Stanley Park in hopes of tracking down that one specific coyote in this incident. But they say in total, they're looking for 6 different coyotes involved in several different attacks in recent months. They say part of the challenge is not only to track them, but then identify them just using visual descriptions they've been given. If you do see a coyote, you're advised not to run away, to make yourself look big and yell. Anita?
Isabel Regam reporting live from Stanley Park tonight. Thanks, Isabel. More people are being told to leave their homes as wildfires rage across BC. Thousands more are on alert. Dan Burrett joins us live with more on this. Dan, I want to start in the Caribou region.
People on 1,500 properties there, Anita, have been told they need to leave now. Take a look. The regional district issued the order today for properties from Flat Lake to Green Lake, south of 100 Mile House, and from Canham Lake to Mahood Lake. And of all of 100 Mile House, about 2,000 people are on evacuation alert as fires burn north and south of that area. Interior Health says it has started to move a small number of patients who have complex health needs from the 100 Mile District Hospital, but the hospital itself is running normally, at least for now. BC Wildfire says it's dealing with 29 fires in and around 100 Mile.
The Flat Lake wildfire has prompted the closure of Highway 97 as it is displaying aggressive fire behavior and moving east towards the highway.
And Dan, further north, there are more evacuations with help from the military. Tell us about that.
Yes, in and around Anaheim Lake. Here's another look at what's happening. Highway 20 is closed because of the Big Stick fire. It is the only highway that moves through the Chilcotin area. The Ulchaco First Nation says that blaze jumped the highway yesterday afternoon. So a military helicopter has been sent to Anaheim Lake Airport to help move evacuees out of that area. A chair of the Caribou Regional District says she understands people are worried.
You have to remember that it's just stuff. As long as you've got your important documents and you've maybe got photos and maybe small treasures that you wouldn't be able to replace. The rest is just stuff. I know it's very hard for people because some of the people that we have evacuated do not have fire insurance.
And Anita, in just the past hour or so, we have more evacuation orders and alerts. The mayor of Cache Creek, east of Kamloops, has now issued an evacuation alert for all properties in that village. Again, it's just an alert for now. Just south of Cache Creek, the regional district has issued an evacuation order for properties just outside the village of Ashcroft. And the Ashcroft Indian Band has posted an evacuation alert for its territory. We have much more on our website, cbc.ca/BC, and we'll have the very latest for you tonight, later in this show if need be, and at 11. Anita.
Yes, in that area in Cache Creek and Ashcroft hit hard by the 2017 wildfires as well. Dan Burritt live for us tonight. Thanks, Dan. And Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Jo, I know you've been watching the wildfire situation closely. What are we expecting?
Yeah, Anita, things seem to be changing sort of hour by hour. We're not seeing new lightning strikes or a big push in wind, but it's that heat, and these fires just continue to grow and become more intense. The other side of the story is the smoke. It is now widespread across the BC interior. I actually want to take you to a live look at Kamloops. Wow, look at that. A very, very low visibility. That is because of the smoke. Otherwise, you'd be looking at blue skies. You'd be able to see right across the valley. This is the kind of shot that we are seeing right across the southern interior tonight as smoke from the wildfires drifts towards the east. So a lot of communities in the line of very heavy smoke, poor air quality in effect. And this is also why it's been hard for firefighters to really estimate the size of some of those fires. They just can't get above it in all the cases. Look at that poor air quality. Everyone in yellow from the northeast Fort Nelson all the way through to the Kootenays. The heat warnings still in place today for the Kamloops region and the southern Okanagan, where temperatures were hitting the high 30s. And notice the heat actually extends right across the prairies as well, also under the same heat dome. Things are changing, but we have to wait 24 hours. Right now, we've got this general west to east flow. That's what has been pushing the smoke to the interior and over the Rockies. This is in advance of a Friday system, and I do have to get to some good news. It's the first time I've really been able to tell you some good news in weeks. We are getting some rain for some of the fire regions. The Chilcotin and Caribou regions looking to get some rain Friday. Maybe as little as 5 to 10 millimeters, but we'll take it. This is sort of the first widespread rain event, not just rain from thunderstorms that we've seen for many of these regions in weeks. But also notice, Anita, the southeast not showing any rain. So it's not good news for everyone. I'll break down that long range forecast for us in Vancouver. We also need the rain coming up, but 24 hours before we get that in those much needed areas.
Okay, thanks, Jo. Families are grieving in Kelowna tonight, coming to terms with the loss of 5 lives. 4 were killed while trying to take down a towering construction crane. A 5th body was pulled from the wreckage of a building crushed below just last night. Brady Strachan is in Kelowna and spoke to family members of those killed.
The twisted metal is a constant reminder of the devastating incident that killed 5 men Monday. One of them was 23-year-old Kalen Vilnius. His father says he had just returned to the construction site after some time off.
Unfortunately, that was his first day back, and he made a half of a shift and then was tragically killed. So.
Vilnius was about to settle down in Kelowna with his girlfriend. The couple had just bought a house.
Coming up to help him move. Unfortunately, that won't happen.
His family is preparing to hold memorial services for Vilnius, one in Kelowna, one in Kitimat, where he grew up. 32-year-old Jared Zook, another victim.
Just a really, really tremendous man.
Smiling photos adorn a memorial board put up among flowers near the site. Dan Johnstone knew him growing up. He says the news is devastating.
Just to think that you never had a chance to say goodbye or I love you or thanks for being a good friend. And it's tough because you never get that opportunity again.
The Stemmer family is mourning 2 losses, Eric and Patrick, brothers from Salmon Arm. Their family owns a construction company that was working on the site when the crane collapsed. The final victim worked in a nearby office. The crane collapsed on his building. Authorities recovered his body from the rubble overnight. The area behind me is still under an evacuation order as work is done to stabilize and remove the crane. The RCMP say they're still investigating what exactly caused the collapse, but we know that workers were in the process of dismantling the crane when it came down. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna, British Columbia.
Well, after plenty of criticism, the province is bolstering BC's emergency response services. Ambulance wait times soared during that deadly heat wave we had, with some people waiting up to 4 hours. Our Tanya Fletcher joins us live now. Tanya, how is the government going to speed up response times?
Well, the province is triggering a bit of a revamp that it says will provide, yes, faster ambulance service, more frontline resources, and better support for workers. And that'll happen in large part by funding 85 new full-time paramedics, 30 full-time dispatchers, 22 new ambulances, and converting 22 rural ambulance stations now to 24/7 Alpha stations. Those are essentially staffed full-time by paramedics. 6 of those are scheduled to be up and running by October. Now, Health Minister Adrian Dix says he's also directing BC Emergency Health Services to take more staff to receive patients and care for them as soon as they arrive at the emergency departments.
I know that our emergency service staff are feeling overwhelmed and frustrated, whether it's helping people with COVID, the toxic drug supply crisis, or the heat wave. Delays in being able to deliver and then leave emergency rooms for ambulance paramedics is an impediment to the delivery of service, and we will work to ensure that that changes.
The province is also morphing an existing board to now focus solely on ambulances, with former Vancouver Police Chief Jim Chu appointed as the board chair.
Okay, now, Tanya, paramedics have been sounding the alarm for quite some time, so how are they reacting to this news?
Emergency responders have been speaking out more recently, we know, about how overworked and understaffed they've been, and many say today they finally feel heard, but they also wonder if this is really the complete overhaul that's needed. The head of the union representing ambulance paramedics and dispatchers says the heat wave a few weeks ago really exposed the vulnerabilities in the entire system, and many things announced today, including more paramedic and dispatch services, stem directly from what they had been asking the province for.
I've already been in contact with Leanne Hempel, the new chief ambulance officer, and she will be meeting with me tomorrow. She had proposed a meeting tomorrow to sit down and talk about where we can do some short-term stuff to get to those announcements and time to get those positions filled and those new ambulances in place and that sort of stuff, and also discuss those other solutions that we've been working on the last couple of weeks.
But does it go far enough? Well, he says there are at least now mechanisms in place with a new restructuring of the board to make sure that any long-term recommendations are made and in place by this fall. Anita?
Thanks, Tanya. The family of a man killed on Easter weekend in the downtown east side is pleading for anyone with information to come forward. On the evening of April 4th, Robinson Russ was stabbed on West Hastings Street between Carroll and Abbott. At first, people nearby thought he was suffering from an overdose and called 911. The 37-year-old was taken to hospital where he died of his injuries. Russ left behind 2 young sons and a stepdaughter.
I'm appealing to anyone who has any information about who killed my son and who took my son's life and who took my son away from his children.
Dozens of people were standing in the area at the time of the stabbing. Police believe someone there knows who was responsible. The killing of Robinson Russ was Vancouver's 4th homicide of 2021. And a warning from Surrey Police tonight about 2 separate sex assaults happening just days apart in Guildford. Last Friday, a woman was assaulted in Hawthorne Park just before 10 p.m. She fought off the attacker and ran, but went to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. On Monday morning, a female youth was pushed from behind and sexually assaulted in Tynehead Park. The man fled and the youth left the park to find help. She didn't get any serious physical injuries, and police say at this time there is no evidence linking the 2 assaults. The first suspect is described as a black male, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 180 pounds, with a muscular build. He had short dreadlocks and was dressed in all black. The second suspect is described as a black male, just over 6 feet tall, with a muscular build and stubble on his face. He was wearing a bright red hoodie, black pants, and red shoes. The Vancouver Art Gallery is displaying a new installation honoring the 215 children whose remains were found at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School.
Here with this message, we want to show that, yes, we are resilient, but we're also beautiful and strong, and they did not kill the Indian and the child. Our culture is still here, our children are here, we have our language and our songs and our dances, and then we also have our professional roles in this world, and we live in both.
The art installation is named Walk Softly. There are photos from residential schools and some family heirlooms never shown before to the public. The images are attached to the ground with wheat paste and will eventually return back to the earth. Organizers hope the art will be an opportunity for learning and conversation. Now in Kamloops, the Tecumloops Teshwetmik will unveil their report findings into the ground-penetrating radar that found the remains tomorrow. We will have full coverage. There's concern there's an influx of cats needing adoption right now in BC. While there was an increase in people picking up cats from shelters over the pandemic, turns out many are now returning them as life goes back to normal. And as the CBC's Benit Brach explains, many of the newly homeless cats will have nowhere to turn.
Cats will get hit by cars, poisoned, shot,
or even euthanized, which was exactly the plan for Cammie, the 16-year-old cat. Her retired owners were traveling a lot and didn't want her anymore. Luckily, cat therapy and rescue took her in.
Thankfully, the vet said she's a perfectly healthy cat.
But the mission-based shelter is temporarily shutting its doors, meaning other cats in need may not have a home to turn to. The reason? A lack of people fostering and adopting. And staff are stretched to the max with 300 cats in-house right now.
This year has been exceptionally bad because it's kind of just happened in one large wave. Within a matter of a week, we had to move over 100 cats out of foster homes.
Her fear is, with no place to go, many cats could get abused.
They're going to be shot or poisoned in the streets, and it is very, very hard to say no.
The rescue says it usually receives nearly 2,000 cats annually. But now 10 to 15 cats are being surrendered a week as COVID restrictions lift and people plan for travel and return to the office. The situation is the opposite at the BC SPCA. The organization has seen its lowest rate of pet returns despite the return to normal.
We always have a very low return rate. It's usually under 5%.
But back in Mission, Chonto says the need for foster parents is greater than ever before.
It's beyond heartbreaking. Because I see so many situations that are really dire. If you've ever thought of fostering, now is the time. Please foster.
But she's emphasizing only if you have the time and resources to do so. Like this cat owner, who knows adopting is a long-term commitment.
You can't just take them for fun. You can't just bring one home and expect your kids are going to look after them. It's going to be your responsibility as an adult.
The The hope is more people like her will step in, so these little guys have a safe and comfortable place to live. Benit Brach, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, the Vancouver Canucks farm team in Abbotsford has picked a name, and I can't tell you it's an original one. The team will also be called the Canucks. The AHL club announced the team's name today, along with their familiar logo featuring Johnny Canuck. The Abbotsford Canucks dark jersey will primarily be field green, and the light jersey will be mountain white. The sleeves will be adorned with an A for Abbotsford.
It's a great step for our entire organization. Like I said, the Vancouver Canuck organization, City of Abbotsford, now the Abbotsford Canucks, and even the province of British Columbia.
The team announced in May they were moving from Utica, New York to Abbotsford. Abbotsford was formerly the home to the Abbotsford Heat, the Calgary Flames AHL affiliate. We continue tonight sharing Indigenous languages spoken across the province. Tonight, Gabriel George from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation tells us how to say the name of an important place in his community. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Gabriel George from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. I would like you to learn this word in the Hunkaminam language. The word is Sa-lail-wat. 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 It means Burrard Inlet. It's important to me because our first ancestor in Tsleil-Waututh came from Burrard Inlet. It's also the original name for these waters. Thank you.
Thank you to Gabriel George. And we always like to remind you that if you are not already doing so, you can watch us live on CBC Gem. That's our free app. CBC Vancouver can also be found on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. COVID cases are growing in the UK, so why is the government cancelling all restrictions in England in just a few days? That's next. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, the Euro Cup excitement last weekend may have had a few people heading to the soccer field themselves, and that includes our littlest ones. A soccer club in Prince Edward Island started up a new division this year just for kids under 3 years old. The players may be small, but their smiles are big. Take a look.
We're gonna run over there as fast as we can, so everybody follow me this way. The program is the Under 3 program, and it's just tons of fun, as you probably saw. Today, we really just set up stations that Under 3s just focused on kind of fundamentals of that age. So we focused on basic movements, basic ball touches. And then of course we kind of just focused on goofing off and having fun elements because it's all about getting the kids outside, enjoying the beautiful weather. Now, I think the goal is really just to kind of get them interested in going outside and being active. I especially think with like the past year with COVID, it's super important to kind of out and moving and having fun. But it's also just another way for them to develop like social skills, physical skills, meet some new friends and stuff like that. Doing a set of complex directions doesn't really work well. We have to kind of split it up and simplify things. And a lot of it is just trying to get the kids to, be okay with getting out of their comfort zone and trying something new. And they maybe haven't kicked a ball before. And so just getting them to try and use their feet instead of their hands is actually a big milestone for them, which is great. Having parents around kind of gets the kids excited too. Like when they see their parents kick a soccer ball, it's wonderful. It's really just about, trying to get them to be in love with the sport, or even if it's not even soccer, just be in love with getting outside and moving.
yet another milestone today for BC vaccinations. More than half of eligible adults have now received their second dose. More than 80% have received a first. 41 new cases in the last 24 hours, and for the 6th day in a row, there are no new deaths to report. The number of people in hospital is also down to 65. That's the lowest since October. 11 people are in intensive care. A pop-up vaccine bus was deployed to White Rock today as health authorities push to get more shots into people's arms.
Just come on down. This is a beautiful location. Fraser Health is excited to look for other areas that folks like to congregate in the summer to provide easy, accessible vaccine.
Fraser Health, the City of White Rock, and TransLink joined forces trying to convince hesitant people to take the plunge. Anyone wanting a second jab was also welcome. And the UK is reporting its highest daily increase in COVID cases since January tonight. Despite this, the government plans to lift most remaining restrictions in England in just days. As Salima Shivji reports, that's left many concerned about another wave.
It's been billed by some as Freedom Day, when people across England are free to leave their masks behind, free to stop keeping their distance, free to start thinking the pandemic is behind them. Not so for Hal Cohen. He's had 2 kidney transplants and 2 jabs, but the medication he's on could mean the vaccine doesn't protect him from infection.
It's a bit of a worrying time for me. Feels really tough and definitely anxiety there on not knowing what risks you should take.
His main worry, and that of others who are immunocompromised, is masks becoming a thing of the past. With coronavirus cases in the UK topping 40,000 today, numbers the country hasn't seen since mid-January, this time fueled by the more contagious Delta variant.
Things like masks on public transport, maybe in shops, I don't really see them being an issue with people's freedom, and then they protect other people like me. So I really would have liked the government to think of us in that respect.
The government argues that vaccination is going well and more cases won't lead to as many hospitalizations. Still, this week, the Prime Minister shifted his tone somewhat.
It is absolutely vital that we proceed now with caution.
Emphasizing caution without changing his plan.
What the scientists are saying is this is the right date, or is as good as any other date to do this.
That's not the consensus. Many doctors and scientists call this move dangerous and irresponsible.
So this is essentially herd immunity by infection for about half of our population. Why on earth we're exposing our young to those risks is very hard to understand or justify from any perspective, whether it's ethical or scientific.
Hard to justify for London's mayor too. He's keeping the mandatory mask order for public transit in the capital as the country experiments with how soon is too soon to lift restrictions. Salima Shivji, CBC News, London.
A leading college in Toronto is requiring students and faculty to be fully immunized in order to be invited back to campus in the fall. As Lorenda Redekop reports, it's the first such institution in Canada to do so.
Come September, any students or staff who plan to attend classes in person here need to be vaccinated.
It just seemed not just the right thing to do, but kind of the consistent and logical thing to do, to say, well, now that we have vaccines generally available, every public health authority in the country is telling us all to get vaccinated, that to come back on campus in the fall, for both employees and our students, you had to be vaccinated.
Many classes will still be online, and there will be hybrid models so students can learn from home. Medical exemptions will be accepted.
I would say I am supportive of policies that will increase people being protected. As we've said, immunization is the most important measure people can take to protect themselves and others.
A passport for within Ontario has not been contemplated by this government. The vision of this government has been to have the highest immunization rate possible through non-mandatory means to protect the population and communities and businesses.
Ryerson and U of T haven't gone that far. They're requiring it for students living in residence. But Seneca College stands by its decision and says this is about public health.
I think our experience with the pandemic thus far is that every time we think we have it licked, it's not licked. And certainly this is raging out of control in certain parts of the world. And so we just can't afford, I don't think, to take the chance.
Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Discarded fishing gear litters the once pristine beaches of BC's coasts. How the province is trying to clean up the mess next.
About 1,500 tourists are stranded in the remote town of Stewart, British Columbia, following a spectacular fire that destroyed the only bridge leading out of the community. The 91-meter wooden bridge on the Alaska-BC border went up like kindling. Arson is suspected. We have this report from Larry Rose.
An old wooden bridge used to go across the Bear River right here. That is, until yesterday. The bridge caught fire, and today, well, there's not much left of it. The fire cut off all traffic south to the rest of BC. This highway is the only way into Stewart or out of it. Police are looking into the possibility the fire was deliberately set.
It was in the afternoon.
Yeah, about 2 in the afternoon?
Yes.
And the bridge was gone in how long?
After about 2 hours, it was down.
The bridge fire might have merely been an inconvenience, except that this week about 1,500 tourists are in Stewart for 50th anniversary celebrations. So far, the residents and tourists are taking the whole thing calmly.
I don't know. I've never seen anybody that was too concerned yet.
But frankly, in Stewart, the biggest problem is finding something to do. The only road left open is a 2-mile strip down to nearby Hyder, Alaska. So what's for everybody to do?
Oh, just go get Hyder ice, I think.
Hyder ice? What does that mean?
Oh, drinking over the other side in Hyder.
Yeah? The pub over there.
Yeah.
The Department of Highways crews are continuing to work at full speed. But even so, it's going to be afternoon on Thursday before a temporary bridge can be put in place. Larry Rose, CBC News, Stewart.
There are more homes built each year in Los Angeles than in any other city in the United States. This will be one of the last to have a wood roof. Los Angeles City Council has outlawed the use of cedar shakes and shingles. The industry that's going to be hurt is Canadian, the small cedar shake and shingle mills of the Fraser River Valley. California is the biggest single market for these mills, and the mill owners are predicting they'll lose anywhere from $50 to $75 million as a result of the decision. But what they're worried about most is that the decision may start a trend.
It tends to be a knee-jerk reaction where people see a city such as the size of Los Angeles and say, gee, if LA did it, it must be a good thing.
British Columbia's cedar industry is almost entirely small family-owned businesses where no one gets rich and even the owners get dirty. They fought hard 3 years ago when the American government imposed a punitive 35% tariff on their cedar. That tariff is finally getting smaller. But for owners like Clint Lobb, who faced losing the mill his grandfather started, this decision means getting ready for yet another battle.
We've kind of felt like we're just starting to get our feet back underneath of us again. You know, the tariff comes off to 10% in December, but now we're faced with this, and it's one thing after another. You know, how much of this can a small industry such as this take?
As soon as the bylaw goes into effect, which is about 30 days from now, the cedar shake and shingle makers say they'll take the city of Los Angeles to court. So once again, the little industry in the Fraser Valley finds itself fighting for survival.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Wildlife can become dependent on people for food. If a person is directly feeding a coyote can start associating people with food and they might approach people more.
Another coyote attack in Stanley Park. A 2-year-old girl sent to hospital with neck and head injuries after the animal suddenly jumped on her. Experts say the animals are likely being fed by people, and that's causing them to get more comfortable.
Waiting to hopefully see him come out of the rubble, but it didn't happen. So.
Families are mourning tonight. 4 workers lost when trying to dismantle a crane in Kelowna. The body of a 5th person was pulled from the rubble of a crushed building when the crane came down.
I know that our emergency service staff are feeling overwhelmed and frustrated.
More paramedics and dispatchers are being hired in BC. 22 new ambulances will be added as well. This comes after criticism following the deadly heat wave that had some people waiting hours for emergency services. Well, on BC's coast, abandoned and lost fishing gear is a growing problem. It's impacting fisheries, and the gear litters what were once pristine beaches. A massive effort is needed to clean all of it up, and millions of dollars as well. Greg Rasmussen caught up with crews doing that hard work, trying to save the province's coastal treasures.
Twilight on the west coast of Vancouver Island, an idyllic vista that plays into Canada's image as a relatively untouched haven in a polluted world. But under the scenic veneer, a deeply troubling, dirty secret.
Pretty well everywhere we stop here, we'd be finding garbage, and really difficult place to clean up. Even getting the garbage off is really a challenge.
This is where the world's unending love affair with plastics crashes into the heartbreak of its impact on the environment. This remote beach rarely sees humans, but it does see a lot of plastic. The crew is sorting waste which is being driven ashore by wind and ocean currents. And there's a lot of it.
Oh, this is good.
Some of the debris can be traced. For instance, this hockey shin pad was likely from a cargo container that fell off a ship in the 1990s.
It was one of the first documented container spills.
Every step in the cleanup involves sweat and muscle. Debris is often entangled with wood or other natural objects.
I can just cut through them pretty easy.
This dock likely broke up somewhere on the west coast during a storm. Large styrofoam floats are the target of the cleanup crew.
We can roll it over.
Freeing the non-biodegradable foam from the wooden planks is just step one.
Okay.
That's a good piece of foam.
Once separated, the foam has to be carried hundreds of meters. Just off the beach, a vivid lesson on why styrofoam is enemy number one.
This is an old dock that washed up in big pieces. So this stuff gets smashed apart by the logs. All of the winter storm action will just grind this down into small pieces. We're left with one little piece like that that can appear like food for some creatures. This ends up in a lot of birds. You can see already, just with this degradation, it's become part of the ground.
With so much shoreline to clean, the little stuff usually gets left behind.
We're looking at trying to get the big stuff before it turns into the small stuff.
Once sorted, it's stuffed into giant bags called super sacks. They line the beach, waiting for pickup by helicopter.
Not exactly light. And this is what we have to walk over with all of this.
BC's cleanup is covering 1,200 kilometers of coastline, with crews scrambling over jagged rocks and jumbles of slippery, wobbly logs.
That probably weighs 200 pounds, just that alone.
Often, debris is a tangled mess.
Plastic bags.
Half buried and too time-consuming to extract.
It would take us a month just to do this section alone, to clear out all of the little stuff that's in here.
A member of the Heshquiet First Nation, Jeff Ignis grew up on these beaches and has seen the plastic pile up over his lifetime.
Diving birds that dive in the ocean, they come up with this wrapped around their necks all the time. They try and eat it when they're diving, and it gets tangled around them, and then they drown. They can't fly, they can't swim, they can't eat. They starve and they die. We had one whale that came ashore that had this kind of green netting wrapped around 3/4 of the animal.
Plastic kills in a variety of ways. Nets and ropes entangle some creatures. Small pieces are mistaken for food and end up causing obstructions in the bellies of animals. And microplastics. The smallest particles are in every ocean around the world, and increasingly inside creatures up and down the food chain, including humans. Further north, another beach, another crew, and days spent fighting through high seas,
It's got a lot of heavy sand on it, I think.
freeing trapped debris, and sorting and weighing every piece that's been found. On board one of the support vessels, skipper Kevin Smith says plastic dumping in the seas needs to be tackled at the source.
It's quite sad to see just how much is coming from the fishing industry. Deep sea fisheries, it's big trawl nets and enormous heavy lines that are just choking out the beaches.
Recently, he shot this video.
One of the absolute worst sites for degraded microplastics that I've ever seen.
He says it's devastating to see remote beaches where plastic particles are more numerous than sand.
Where we were walking on a rainbow-colored beach of plastics. And the microplastics is, I think it's the issue for our generation.
But for now, the plastic onslaught continues.
Check this out. This whole bank is basically foam. As far as you can stick your hand in, as far as you can dig in. Completely disheartening. This whole bank of this whole bay.
In such a beautiful, pristine area.
A fleet of vessels normally employed in the tourist trade is being used to support the cleanup, helping house and feed the workers.
Here we've actually been able to make an industrial scale difference, and it's really exciting.
Ross Campbell usually hosts foreign visitors aboard his boat. His business was hit hard by COVID-19, but he and other operators have shifted into cleanup work, paid by a $7 million plastic removal fund set up by the BC government. He wishes more people could see the scale of this largely hidden problem.
There's two ways of looking at this. It could either light our hair on fire because it's an insurmountable problem, or we can realize that the very fact that we're doing this is letting the world know how bad the problem is and it can't be avoided any longer.
From the beach, debris is slung out beneath a helicopter. It then travels the coast by barge. Finally, it's loaded into a truck and sent here. This new recycling center has been created to handle the unique needs of ocean plastics.
These are barrels.
With concern growing, many are calling for the plastic industry to do more.
A lot of these materials are contaminated, so we've set this center up to manage these materials specifically so that we can create specific products out of ocean plastics.
The final product, recycled pellets in need of a market.
The effects of plastic pollution are really being felt on a global scale. And this is putting a lot of pressure on companies to do something about the plastics that they're using and selling for their products.
Although the BC effort appears impressive, here's a sobering statistic. This year's entire cleanup project will likely gather about 400 tons of plastic. But over the course of this year alone, about 8 million tons will be added to the world's oceans. On the beach, a message to the world's plastic polluters.
It is quite disturbing. Garbage cans are made for a reason. That's not supposed to be a garbage can.
In the end, all this hard work is only a temporary solution. That's because as long as plastic waste is entering this ocean, it's going to end up in places like this. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Estevan Point, BC.
It's an extremely ambitious plan to tackle climate change, but can the EU get members to buy in? We break down the goals next. And at 6:43, you are looking at a live shot of the beautiful Mount Baker in the distance. Things are set to cool down on the south coast, but will it last? Johanna has her full forecast next.
I came home about 20 years ago to look after my mother. When I came home, my father had said to me, "Oh, I've got 4 paint horses and they haven't been around people. So if you go and you see them, just beware they might either come after you, or if you get too close, they might kick or try to bite you because they don't know you. They'll be defensive, right? And nobody's worked with them." On my morning walk, I would go into the valley, and sure enough, there's the 4 horses up the top of the hill. I walked halfway up the hill, and I sat down the side of the hill, and next thing you know, I hear this thump, 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 and you can hear the walking of the horse coming up behind me, and I sat really still. I just started speaking to the stallion in my language. I said, "Ambostich, ushimana, neman kocheno wastanenya onen, no miso pigina, misnen mankochena pinchoy tungtats, chikimukans, ushimana." I could hear him. He's smelling my head. His nostrils at my ear going, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, sit still, trust, trust. Not long after, the broodmare, the lead broodmare, did the same thing. And I thought, this is an amazing feeling to make that connection with horses. And next thing you know, all the horses would come around and they would allow me to pet them and, you know, scratch their ears and everything else. A couple months later, my father checks on the horses and he goes, "Have you been spending time with the horses?" I said, "Yeah." "They didn't do anything?" "No." I said, "If anything, Dad, I spoke to them in our language, and I just asked them to share the area with me." And he says, "My gosh, those horses were wild, and you've tamed them." And I'm going, "Okay. I thought everybody can do that." He goes, "No, not everybody can do that." He says, "You're a horse whisperer." And I'm going, "Okay, I guess I am."
Just hi, I'm here. Good boy. Belly rubs. Belly rubs. Good boy. Do you love Helen? He says he rubs the best spots.
Makes you feel good. There, my sweetie.
Should we go see some other people?
Bye, Zombie.
When your backyard is burning, is anywhere safe? I'm Adrienne Lamb, the host of a new podcast, World on Fire. Join us on the front lines of wildfires burning around the world. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
The European Union has unveiled an ambitious new plan to combat climate change. It proposes sweeping changes with measures likely affecting Canadian exports to Europe. As the CBC's Tessa Arcilia reports, the plan faces a long negotiation process before it comes into force.
The European Union unveiled their most ambitious plan yet to tackle climate change. They're calling it Fit for 55. The goal is to slash greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Now, this would require huge changes, huge transitions. Take a listen to what the EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen had to say.
Our package aims to combine the reduction of emissions with measures to preserve nature and to put jobs and social balance at the heart of this transformation.
Some specific plans in that climate policy include raising the cost of emitting carbon for heating, transport and manufacturing, as well as taxing high carbon aviation and shipping fuel. Now, they're also planning to put in place the world's first carbon border tariff, which means requiring companies or manufacturers outside the European Union who come from places with less stringent climate policies to pay for the CO2 costs when they're selling of goods into the EU, like steel, fertilizers, aluminum, and this could potentially impact Canada's exports into the bloc. Now, they're also looking at banning the sale of new combustion engine vehicles by 2035. Now, the EU policymakers were focusing on the sense of urgency in needing to tackle climate change, citing Canada's recent heat wave to drive the point home. Take a listen to Frans Timmermans.
There is no time to waste. People are dying in northwest Canada because it's 50 degrees Celsius there. Northwest Canada. Siberia reaches temperatures over 35 degrees. Central Europe is over 40 degrees. We saw tornadoes in the Czech Republic. Who would ever have thought of that? So anyone who wants to deny the urgency of the climate crisis should look again.
Well, one of the biggest challenges to getting this policy through is cost and the question of who is going to foot the bill. Now, Timmermans said the EU's plan is to put a price on carbon and a premium on decarbonization, encouraging innovation and greener alternatives. Now, there's already been opposition to the proposals coming from some EU governments and industry lobbyists. And of course, there are still months of negotiations ahead to get 27 member states to agree before this becomes law. But for those backing this EU climate policy and this climate plan, they're saying that they're simply giving humanity a fighting chance. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, London.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, Tessa just mentioned climate change top of mind for a lot of people here with the heat wave and the wildfires. And now we're heading into one of our driest stretches yet.
Absolutely, yeah. The fingerprints of climate change all over this first half of summer, and interesting that it was used in the announcement today for the EU deal. We do have the driest stretch continuing for Metro Vancouver. This is day 29 without any rain. 30 days tomorrow. I don't see any chance until at least the weekend, and then it's only a very slight chance. We'll likely end up at least in the top 3 driest stretches that I can see for Metro Vancouver. Let me take you to the current temperatures. Those have also been running high. 23 net right now in through YVR, but inland we've been hitting the 27, 28 degree mark. Let me take you through the forecast for much of Western Canada. It has been exceptionally hot in through the interior. Those heat warnings likely dropping tomorrow or Friday as we do see some marine air move in. That will come with rain, as I mentioned earlier, for central and northern coastal sections. I should also mention, though, just hearing a new update tonight in through the Vanderhoof area, Bulkley, Nechako region, new evacuation orders just being announced this evening. And we will have the latest cbc.ca/BC. Things are changing rapidly through this evening. And as I show you that Friday forecast, that rain couldn't come soon enough for those regions. And it isn't going to be a guarantee either, but definitely a general 5 to 10 millimeters for parts of the province. Taking you right through to Saturday, temperatures still warm in the interior, but these are our seasonal levels for at least a few days. Look at this, Sunday into Monday, things start to creep up yet again for the interior. So it's maybe a 2-3 day break from the intense heat in the southeast. And this rain that I'm tracking, as I said, it won't reach everyone across the province. In fact, here in Metro Vancouver, there's just a slight chance Saturday morning as that low moves inland, but you can see those more widespread showers tracking across the region. So one more dry day tomorrow for these areas dealing with explosive wildfire conditions. We don't have a lot of lightning tonight. So as I keep saying, sort of the fire situations that we're seeing rapidly evolve is just because the existing fires are getting so big and continuing to grow in size. There's the hope of some early morning showers Saturday, Anita, before we get back to our continued dry stretch. I think we could probably go another week, but I'll keep you posted.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Joe.
You're welcome.
Most cats aren't known to like long walks, adventure hikes, rides on boats. Well, most cats aren't like Gary. Meet the Alberta cat who's breaking the meow mold next.
From lumber to bread to workout equipment, many products have experienced a spike in popularity during the pandemic. But what about worms? Turns out they've taken off too, especially on social media.
We will sell them all through the summer season, and we usually go about 100 to 150 pounds, especially since COVID, like I'd mentioned. Our demand has grown, I would say, well up over 80% in substantial growth.
Here in Bay Bulls, Trouter's Special Worm Farm is the only commercial-scale farm of its kind in the province. It even ships worms to the mainland. So what is it about worms? They have a special talent for turning food waste into fertile soil, a process called vermicomposting. And that talent has its price, $55 per pound.
Your worms would then eat through that organic material, and what they excrete then is their castings.
So what exactly is the nutritional value of the soil worms produce? And what is the difference to a normal compost bin? I went to the botanical garden in St. John's to find out.
The worm castings are very concentrated compost and very high in nutrients. Now, really what they're pooping out is what they're eating. So whatever we're putting into our bin is going to say what you're going to be getting out of it. For most plants, adding compost is going to help make any plant happy. Most plants.
Worms don't eat through weeds, per se. Sometimes when you get manures and stuff, you worry about the weed issues.
But not all worms are the same. The European red wiggler is the go-to worm for composting.
These worms are always working in the top inches of your soil and eating that organic matter, where some worms just move away and don't look for that. You can pick many worms from your garden, but not all will be successful in what you're trying to achieve.
Composting worms have a list of needs: the right temperature, the right type and amount of food, and the right level of moisture.
They're like pets, and they have requirements. If they're not happy with their environment that they're living in, they try to leave.
If you're looking to treat your vegetables to something special, these new pets might just be what you've been looking for. Henrike Wilhelm, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, I never was there a cat so clever as Gary. Okay, well, he might not be ready for Broadway, but Gary the cat is pretty darn famous. And now the adventurous feline is calling Edmonton home. We caught up with Gary and his owner. Take a look.
We just did our first Edmonton adventure last week. We did a paddle down the North Saskatchewan. I'm sure we'll do that again. I'm James, and this is Gary. Gary's a 6-year-old domestic long-haired cat. We go hiking, we paddle, and we even go skiing together. It started small, just getting him used to being in his harness. We did the classic cat sort of freeze up and tip over when we first put it on, but eventually he got used to it, and slowly we introduced new things, and now he's super comfortable being outside. I think we're up to around 400,000 on Instagram and 450,000 on TikTok. I feel like a lot of social media these days is kind of negative a little bit, and so this was just a way to have fun, and it's taken off far beyond any expectations that I've had. It's not too common to see someone hiking around with their cat, especially just, he's kind of, you can see, sits and rides on my shoulders quite a bit and sniffs the breeze. And now as the Instagram account has grown a little bit and people have seen him around on social media, we get a lot of, oh my gosh, is that Gary? People want to meet him and say hi, give him a scratch. So it's just nice to be able to make people smile and brighten people's days. And I'd love to get Gary out to Elk Island, do some hiking around there, maybe check out the Pembina River. So yeah, we'll have to explore a little bit around the new neighborhood.
Amazing. Gary doing more traveling than most of us. Love Gary. Well, you can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Dan Burrett is here at 11 o'clock after the National with your next local news. Have a good night.